Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Before I start, let me introduce myself. My name is Almarito Medianto with NIM 240512141121. So today I'm gonna review a paper. Let's start. Okay. First of all, this paper is not a research paper, but it's a literature review. From page 1, we can see that the title is Risk Assessment and Risk Management, Review of Recent Advance on their Foundation. It read by Terji Evan, and this paper is available online at 21 December 2015. So from the abstract, we can understand that the purpose of this paper, background of this paper is synthesis and evaluates the development of risk assessment and risk management as a scientific field over the past 30 to 40 ago. 30 to 40 years ago. And for the purpose of this paper, we can know at section 1 is introduction. We can know that the purpose of this paper is to review recent advance in the risk field with a special focus on the fundamental ideas and thinking that from the foundation of generic research. We can know from this sentence. Anyway, I already gave some highlight on this paper, so it's gonna be more easy for me to. Okay. For the methodology, this paper does not have an explicit methodology section, but it has been a challenge. I'm sorry. The author openly acknowledged a degree from subjectivity in the selection process. We can know from this sentence. Recognizing the subjectivity of section and a deliberate bias toward the recent paper and the areas of interest of the author of this manuscript for review and discussion of the early development of the risk file. Okay, I think that's the methodology, because the author didn't mean methodology explicitly. So we can get that this paper has 7 sections: 1 introduction to the risk file and science, and 3 risk conceptualization, and 4 is uncertainty in risk assessment, and 5 is risk management principle and strategies. I think this section is the longest section in this paper. And 6 is the future of risk assessment and management. And for the last, we have conclusion. But for the finding of this paper is on the section 3, 4, 5, and 6. So let's start with finding number 1 is section risk conceptualization. For a long time, different fields and experts have defined risk in different ways. Some define it as probability, some as an expected loss, and some as a combination of both. This inconsistency have been a long-standing problem in the risk field. To address this, the Society of Risk, or SRA, built a new glossary. So the glossary is found the idea that it's still possible to establish authority author, authoritative definition. The key being to allow of different perspective on fundamental concept and to make a distinction between overall qualitative definition and their associated measurement. And in this section we have overall qualitative definition of risk. This part the author present 5 types of risk of from the glossary we have 7 qualitative definition of risk. We can see on this section A, B, C, D, E until G. They all share the same core idea, which is that risk combines consequence and uncertainty. 4 is the consequence of an activity and associated uncertainties. Another defines it as uncertainty about and severity of the consequence of an activity with respect to something that human value. And now defining risk qualitatively is one thing, but in practice we also need ways to measure or describe risk quantitatively. The author presents 5 risk metrics in section 3.1. This section. The most common one is the combination of probability and the severity of consequence. Another in the nuclear industry for decades. A more advanced metric is the triplet of consequence, a measure of uncertainty and background knowledge, which acknowledge that the strength of our knowledge matters just as much as the number themselves. Okay, I think that's the point of section 3. Let's move to section 4, uncertainty in risk assessment. If section 3 taught us about what risk is, in this section 4 we can know that how to deal with what we don't know, and this is arguably Okay, now let's move to section 4, which discuss uncertainty in risk assessment. The section start in page 5. So if section 3 taught us what risk is, section 4 teach us how to deal with what we don't know. And this is arguably one of the most important and challenging part of the entire risk fight. So the author starts by pointing out that the uncertainty uncertainty is actually a central element of risk itself, as we already saw in section 3, but how we handle that uncertainty in practice we can know in this section. First, the author distinguishes between two fundamentally different types of uncertainty. First is aleatory, and two is epistemic. First, we will discuss for aleatory uncertainty. So, the first type, this is the kind of uncertainty that comes from natural randomness, things that are inherently unpredictable, no matter how much data we collect. A simple example is flipping a coin. No matter how many times you flip it, you cannot predict with certainty whether the next flip will be number or picture. This type of uncertainty cannot be eliminated. We can only describe it using probability based on observed frequencies. And for the second one is epistemic. So this is this comes not from randomness but from a lack of knowledge. If we had more data, better models, or better understanding, this uncertainty could potentially be reduced. For example, imagine a new discovered chemical substance. We do not know how dangerous it is, not because danger is inherently random, but simply because we have not studied it enough yet. Now, the most common tool used to handle both types of uncertainty is probability, specifically Bayesian subjective probability. Bayesian probability is not always appropriate, especially when our background knowledge is very weak. In case like this, if someone, for the example, I will go, for the example is if someone asks you to probability of something you know absolutely nothing about, any number you give will be essentially meaningless. Forcing an analysis to assign a specific probability in such a situation gives a false impression of confidence. It makes the decision maker think we know more than we actually do. In a case like this, the author suggests that alternative approach may be more honest and more appropriate. One such approach is possibly theory, which instead of giving one specific probability, gives a range or an interval that reflects our genuine of ignorance. But the author goes even further. He introduces a concept called range of knowledge, often abbreviated as SOK. The idea is simple but powerful. When we report a probability, we should also report how strong or how weak the knowledge behind the probability is. So instead of saying the probability is 10%, we say the probability is 10%, but our knowledge supporting this number is weak because we have limited data, uncertain assumption, and little expert agreement. This SOK concept is evaluated based on several criteria, including whether the assumption made are well justified, whether there is sufficient and reliable data available, whether experts agree with each other, and whether the phenomenon being studied is well understood. The author also discussed uncertainty important analysis, which is about identifying which source of uncertainty contribute the most of the overall risk. This helps decision makers know where to focus their attention and research when trying to reduce uncertainty. And finally, the author addressed model uncertainty. Every risk assessment uses some kind of model to represent reality, but no model is perfect. Model uncertainty refers to how much we trust like the model itself to accurately represent what we are trying to assess. This is often overlooked but can be a significant score of error in risk assessment. Okay, that's the point of section 4. Now let's move into next section 5. It's the longest section in this paper. It covers risk management principle and strategies starting on page 6. If section explain what if section 3 explain what risk is, and section 4 explain how to handle uncertainty, then section 5 answer the most practical question of all. What do we actually do about risk? So in this section, the author begins by laying out two fundamental pillars of risk management, as we can see in this sentence. The pillar is the three major strategies for managing risk. The second pillar is the structure of the risk management process itself. Okay, now let me explain both of them. Starting with the three strategies. The first strategy is called the risk-informed strategy. We use risk assessment, meaning data, models, and probability or calculation to guide our decision. For example, a company decides to install a safety valve because the risk assessment shows a high probability of a pressure build-up. This is the most commonly used strategy and forms the backbone of most risk management practice today. And for the second strategy is the cautionary of precautionary strategy. The strategy is used when the consequence of an activity could be very serious, but we do not yet have enough scientific evidence to be certain about the risk. Rather than waiting for definitive proof, we take protective action early. A real-world example would be banning a pesticide from its long-term effects are fully proven, because the potential harm to human health is simply too great to ignore. And for the third strategy is the discussive strategy. So this strategy focuses on building trust and reducing ambiguity through open communication, involving affected communicators and making decision-making process transparent and accountable. It recognizes that risk decisions are not purely technical, they also involve value, politics, and human relationships. The author is very clear that in most real situation, all three strategies not to be combined. No single strategy is sufficient on its own. Now let me explain 6 steps of management activity as you can see in this part. Okay, step 1 is establishing context. It means defining the purpose of the risk management activity, setting goals, and determining what criteria will be used to evaluate the risk. And for the step 2 is identify situation and event. It can be hazard, threat, or opportunities. This involves systematically looking for everything that could go wrong, or in some cases, go right. Common tools used here include checklists, HAZOP analysis, and FMEA. And step 3 is conducting cause and consequence analysis. Once hazards are identified, we analyze what could cause them and what their effect might be. Tools used here include fault tree analysis, event tree analysis, and Bayesian network. And for the step 4 is making judgment about likelihood of event and their consequence and producing a risk description or characterism. And for the 5th step is evaluating the risk. It means we judge how significant the risk is and whether it is acceptable or requires action. And for the 6th step is risk treatment, meaning we decide what to do about the risk, whether to avoid it, reduce it, transfer it, or even accept it. The author emphasized that throughout all 6 steps, there is always a need for managerial review and judgment. Models and calculation are just tools. The human decision maker must always look beyond the numbers and consider what the analysis might have missed. So in this part, in this section, let's go to the important subtopic of this section. The first subtopic is precautionary principle, as we can see in point 5.1. Okay, the first subtopic is the first topic is discussed in this section. This principle states that if an activity could have serious consequences and there is specific uncertainty about those consequences, then precautionary measures should be taken even without conclusive proof of harm. It sounds straightforward, but in practice, it has been highly controversial. And the main reason is that deciding what counts as specific uncertainty is itself a value judgment, not a purely scientific one. Different people with different value and interests will draw that line in different places. The author also makes an important distinction between the cautionary principle and the personality principle. So the cautionary principle is broader. It simply says that when consequences could be serious, we should take protective action, even when the phenomena are well understood. The precautionary principle specifically applies when there is genuine scientific uncertainty. Both principles are important, but they apply in different situations. Okay, that's the point of subtopic in this section. Let's move to next subtopic is 5.2 robustness. Okay, this part. So, robustness refers to the capacity of system or decision to remain acceptable even when things do not go exactly as planned. In other words, a robust solution is one that works reasonably well across wide range of possible scenario, not just the most likely one. For the example, think about building a bridge. A robust bridge is not just designed for average traffic condition. It is designed to handle unexpected heavy loads, storm, and other extreme conditions that we not specifically predicted. However, the author warns that ro- I'm sorry. The author warns that robust optimization comes with challenge. There are many different ways to define and measure robustness, and none of them is objectively better than the others. This means that robustness analysis should always be treated as decision support tools, not as definitive answer. So they must always be followed up with broader managerial judgment. Okay, now let's move into subpart is 5.3 resilience on page H. Okay, this section. Well, robustness is about resisting disruption. Resilience is about how recovering from it. A resilient system can absorb a shock, adapt to it, and bounce back over, often becoming stronger in the process. The author identified four key abilities of the author also comment reason of the the author identifies four key abilities of a resilient system we can see in this sentence. So, first, it can respond to both regular and irregular threats in a flexible and adaptive way. And for the second, it can monitor its own performance and detect early warning. Sorry, for the second, monitor its own performance and detected early warning signs. And for the third, it can anticipate risks and opportunities before they fully materialize. And for the last, it can learn from experience and improve over time. The author resilience to the concept of high reliability organization or HRO. The this part this These are organizations that operate in high-risk environment but maintain very low rates of failure, such as aircraft carrier and nuclear power plants. They achieve this through five principles, and the five principle is preoccupation with failure, reluctance to simplify, sensitivity to operation, and commitment to resilience, and difference to expertise. The author also introduced the concept of anti-fragility from Taleb in this section. This section, which takes resilience one step further. An anti-fragile system does not just survive disruption, it actually benefits from it and grows stronger. The key message is that top performance over time requires embracing, not avoiding, some level of uncertainty and variation. Okay, I think that's the point of sub subtopic resilience. So we can go to the next subtopic. So in 5.4 we discuss about large or deep uncertainties. Covered in section 5.4 on page 8 and 9, deep uncertainty refers to situations where we do not just lack data, we lack the ability to even build reliable models or define the problem clearly. Examples include preparing for climate change, managing a pandemic, or dealing with entirely new technologies. In this situation, traditional statistical methods simply do not work. The author argued that we need combination of cautionary strategic, robust and resilient approach, and adaptive management. So adaptive management means we do not try to find single best decision upfront, but we choose a reasonable course of action, monitor its effect carefully, and continuously adjust as we learn more. So this is something called learning by doing. Okay, let's move to next subpart is 5.5. This subtopic is surprises and black swans. A black swan's a term made famous by Nassim Taleb refers to an event that is extremely rare, has massive consequences, and seems obvious only in hindsight. Classic examples include the 2008 financial crisis and the September 11 attack. The author argued that traditional risk assessment, which rely heavily on historical data and probability calculation, are poorly equipped to handle black swan. By definition, this event fall outside what our models and data can anticipate. So the solution, according to the author, is not to try to predict black swan because that is essentially impossible. Instead, we should build systems and organizations that are adaptive and resilient enough to survive and recover when the unexpected happen. Okay, I think that's the point of subtopic 5.5. Now we can move to another subtopic is 5.6 risk criteria. So risk criteria are thresholds or standard we use to judge whether a risk is acceptable or not. For example, a regulation might state that the probability of fatal accident must not exceed 1 in a million per year. The author makes a very important argument here. Okay, so the author risk assessment criteria should be set by public authorities, not by the industry themselves. The reason is that companies naturally tend to optimize for their own interests, which may not align with the broader interests of society. When industry set their own risk criteria, they often end up being less strict than what society would actually want. The author also discuss about ALRARP in this part. We can see ALIRP, which stand for as low as reasonably perceivable. These principles say that risk must be reduced as far as possible, unless the cost of further reduction is grossly disproportionate to the benefit gained. In other words, we should always try to make things safer, but we do not have to spend unlimited research doing so. However, the author warns that implementing this poorly through cost-benefit calculation is dangerous, because those calculations often fail to adequately capture uncertainty. A broader managerial review is always needed alongside the number. And I think this is the last subtopic in section 5 is integrative perspectives. And this is the last, so I think we can go to the next section 6 in this page. So the section 6 is the future of risk assessment and management. After reviewing what risk is, how to handle uncertainty, and how to manage risk, the author now asks a forward-looking question: where does the risk file need to go from here? So the author begins by identifying what he sees as the single biggest challenge facing the risk file today. The challenge is the need to shift from a focus on accurate risk estimation and prediction toward a focus on describing and characterizing knowledge and lack knowledge in simpler terms. Instead of pretending we can calculate risk precisely, we should be more honest about what we know and what we do not know. We can see from this sentence. This shift is especially important because the world is becoming increasingly characterized by situations of large and deep uncertainty. Think about climate change, cybersecurity threat, and pandemic. These are situations where we not have enough historical data to build reliable models, and where the boundaries of the problem are not even clearly defined. Traditional statistical and probabilistic tools simply cannot handle these kinds of situations. So the author introduced the concept of emerging risk to describe this challenge. An emerging risk is defined as a situation where our background knowledge is still weak, but there are already indications that a new type of event, one that has never occurred before in that context, could happen in the future and potentially have very severe consequences. What makes emerging risks practically difficult is that we cannot fully specify what the consequence might be, and sometimes we cannot even fully describe what the event itself would like. A good real-world example for an emerging risk would be the early warning about a potential global pandemic that exists year before COVID-19 actually happened. The signals were there, but knowledge was weak. The models were uncertain, and the full picture was impossible to see clearly in advance. Because of this, the author argued that a purely probabilistic approach such as Bayesian analysis would not be sufficient for dealing with emerging risks. The background knowledge needed to build reliable probability models simply would not be there. Instead, we need to balance multiple risk management strategies in an adaptive manner, including cautionary strategies and careful attention to early signals and warning. The author also points to several other areas where substantial research and development are still needed. Okay, the first area is critical infrastructure system like electrical grids, transportation networks, water supply system, and communication networks are extremely complex and often deeply interconnected. A failure in one system can cascade rapidly into failures across many others. Current risk assessment methods are not well equipped to handle this level of complexity and interdependence. The second area is security. Unlike safety risks, security risks involve international actors, people or groups who are actively trying to cause harm. This makes them fundamentally different from accidental risks. Assessing security risks often requires qualitative judgment about intention and capabilities, which do not fit neatly into traditional probabilistic framework. So the author sees a huge potential for improvement here by developing integrated framework that combines standard security approach with more rigorous uncertainty assessment method. The author also highlights the growing complexity of social risk decision making, and some of the specific research questions the author raised include how should risk and uncertainty assessment will be visualized and communicated to diverse stakeholders, and how should risk acceptability be judged in relation to the measurement tools being used, and how can we accurately represent uncertainty in a way that does not mislead decision maker. The other clause this section by noting that um, one particularly important emerging research topic is the link between sustainability and race. As organization and society increasing focus on sustainable development, the connection between long-term sustainability goals and risk management practice are become impossible to ignore. So that's the point of section 6. And we have the last section is conclusion in section 7. The conclusion are explicitly stated in section 7. The author draw three main conclusions. One is the scientific foundation of risk assessment and risk management is still somewhat shaky on some issues, in the sense that both theoretical work and practice rely on perspective and principle that culturally misguide decision maker. Example include the general conception of risk as expected value or a probability distribution. And point 2 is, in recent years several attempts at integrative research have been conducted establishing broader perspective on the conceptualization, assessment, and management of risk. The person author sees this way of thinking as essential for developing the risk field and obtaining a strong unifying scientific platform for this risk field and obtaining a strong unifying scientific platform for this field. This perspective relate to these 5 points you can see in this sentence. And the last point is, there are signs of a revitalization of the interest in foundational issues in risk assessment and management, which is welcome and necessary for meeting the challenge the risk field now face related to social problems and complex technological and emerging risks. Okay, we finished this paper. Now I think I will give a critical analysis from this paper. In terms of strength, I think this paper offers a remarkably comprehensive overview of the risk field's development. The integrative thinking approach that the author promotes is both intellectually refreshing and practically useful, as it encourages synthesis rather than choosing between conflicting perspectives. However, there's also notable limitation. First, the author relies heavily on his own previous works throughout the review. This raises questions about the objectivity of the literature section. And the second is the social and political dimension of risk management receive relatively little attention despite being highly relevant in real world decision making context. And the third is some concepts introduced, such as strength of knowledge, and still lack concrete operational guidance for practitioners, as we can see in section 1. And one particularly interesting observation in this paper is, this paper was published in 2015 before a major global crises such as COVID-19. Yet the other discussion of emerging risks and deep uncertainties already points toward the kinds of practitioner. And I think this makes the paper both visionary and at the same time raise the question of whether the framework proposed are sufficient to handle the scale of risk we now encounter. So I think that's all that I can say. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.